There we go. All right. Good morning, everyone. I hope you are doing well today. Make sure everything's on the up and up. Good, Mar. All right. And we have audio there. Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. This is a greetings from my desk. Wish you were here. Although given the COVID crisis, maybe I'm glad you're not. Oh. Well, let's see what our weather has in store for us today. Oh, need that window, not that window. No. That's the window I need. There we go. All right. Oh, it did not take my... Let's go to today. Come on. There we go. All right. It is currently 72 degrees in the great metropolis of Brandon, Iowa. High of 81. Nothing too terrible. In fact, for the middle of August, that's a pretty darn cool day. Check our 10-day forecast here. All right, we've got mid to high 80s throughout the week, but still, they don't have anything, it looks like, of any storms or anything coming up the next week, so I think we might have a pretty good week coming up, so I think we'll be able to handle this just fine. Come back to me, come back to me. There we go. Whoa! Trying to adjust to different lighting, I suppose. Oh, yeah, because the sun is now getting to that point where it's really, really bright in here. So if I move, it's trying to adjust for the lighting and it doesn't know how. All right, well, I'll go ahead and get started here. This is from another book. This is 40 Days with Wesley. It is a Wesleyan-themed devotional. I will not be sticking to one book day after day after day, mainly because that gets rather dull. Also, especially when you have, like, this Wesleyan book is wonderful. It takes excerpts from Wesley's actual sermons. However, they're written as Wesley would have written them, bearing in mind Wesley lived in the 1700s. So the language used is not exactly the same kind of language that we would use. So, but here, this is the day one for the 40 Days with Wesley. Day one, the true God. The scripture is from Acts 17, verses 23 through 28. What you worship as unknown, I now proclaim to you God, who made the world and everything in it, is Lord of heaven and earth. He doesn't live in temples made with human hands, nor is God served by human hands, as though he needed something, since he is the one who gives life, breath, and everything else. From one person God created every human nation to live on the whole earth, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their lands. In fact, God isn't far away from any of us. In God we live, move, and exist. As some of your own poets said, we are his offspring. And this is the first Wesley reading. And as the true God, he is also the supporter of all the things that he hath made. He beareth, upholdeth, sustaineth all created things by the word of his power, by the same powerful word which brought them out of nothing. As this was absolutely necessary for the beginning of their existence, it is equally so for the continuance of it. Were his almighty influence withdrawn, They could not subsist a moment longer. Hold up a stone in the air. The moment you withdraw your hand, it naturally falls to the ground. In like manner, were he to withdraw his hand for a moment, the creation would fall into nothing. That is from Sermon 77. God is sovereign, and therefore God is able to care for and provide for all of creation. In a world of almost instant communication and graphic storytelling about the tragedy and pain of the world, it is easy to forget this ancient truth. Once we lose the concept of God as sovereign, our prayers, our faith, and our very souls begin to shrink. To believe in a severely limited God takes the heart out of reverence and out of prayer. Commitment to a God that is too small will stifle any hope for a transformed world and dull our efforts to bring such a world into being. We became prisoners to our own weaknesses and the evil of the world when we forget that God is sovereign and God is able. Not only our salvation, but our prayers, our hope, our trust, our work, and our very lives are at risk when we follow a God too small to meet the needs of all of creation. Wesleyan theology never suffered from this weakness. From the very beginning, Wesley was clear about the sovereignty of God. He never doubted God's ability to care for and provide for all that God has created. God was omnipotent, and there could never be any threat to God's power. Wesley did not minimize human responsibility, but was always clear that God was sovereign, and absolutely no worthy human endeavor could occur without God's participation. If God were to withhold participation, the creation itself would collapse. Prayers that are completely dependent upon a sovereign God will touch the most troubling parts of our lives and society as a whole. Once we begin to incorporate belief in a sovereign God into our lives, we will be unafraid to throw our energies into the struggle that seems overwhelming without God. Fear, anxiety, and hopelessness are driven from our lives, for this sovereign God loves us and is able to care for us. We can live confidently and faithfully because God is able to care for and provide for all of creation. This is the second Wesley reading. In a word, there is no point in space, whether within or without the bounds of creation, where God is not. Indeed, this subject is far too vast to be comprehended by the narrow limits of human understanding. We can only say, the great God, the eternal, the Almighty Spirit, is as unbounded in his presence as in his duration and power. Ooh. It can be easy, when you look at the world today, to wonder, where is God? If we look, many of you who have followed me on Facebook, you see the jokes that I make about where 2020 is going next, whether it's, the Borg are coming, or Jurassic Park is coming, or Godzilla is coming. And the fact of the matter is, these ideas seem less and less extreme as the year keeps going. And so especially in a year like this year, we can wonder, where is God? And it can become very easy then to feel that God has abandoned us. But the truth of the matter is, God has not abandoned us. God will never abandon us. A lot of people look at the book of Revelations, and they see, when they view it as this dire prophecy of our world coming to a horrifying conclusion, fire and brimstone falling from the sky. But that wasn't the intention of the book of Revelations. The book of Revelation was not written to scare people. It was written basically to say, even when the sky is literally falling, God is still with us. Sometimes we might think that, good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. In a wonderful Disney-esque world, that would be true. But we don't live in a Disney-esque world. And one of the great theological questions is, why do good things happen to bad people? Why do bad things happen to good people? And we look at that as example of God just putting his hands up. I don't touch it. Not me. And that's not entirely true. If you've ever seen the movie Bruce Almighty, there's a line when Bruce has just been given the power of God. And God tells him, all right, you've got this. I'm going on vacation. And Bruce turns to God and says, the God takes vacations? You don't do thee? And God says, what do you call the Dark Ages? Now, it's a funny enough little joke. But even during the Dark Ages, God was still present in our world. God has never abandoned us. He will never abandon us. Those moments when you feel lost, those moments when you feel that life is starting to take its toll. Some of the words of comfort people have said, which I do not agree with, God never gives us more than we can handle. The problem with that is that it assumes God gave us our struggles, gave us our strife. Like he's just tormenting us the way that I torment The Sims when I play The Sims. But that's not quite true. God does not give us the bad times expecting us to turn to him. God remains with us when the bad times come to help us through them. The fact of the matter is, the phrase, God never gives us more than we can handle, implies that we can do it ourselves. And the actuality is quite the opposite. During those difficult times, that is when we really need to throw ourselves into his presence to help guide us, to have that strength right there beside us. God did not create this virus just to make us all stay indoors. This is not, God did not send suffering. God did not cause death on this scale out of some biblical retribution or to teach us a lesson or anything along those lines. What God is doing is standing with us as we walk this course. The virus and the pain it has caused, that's not God's doing. God is not causing us to have that kind of suffering. That's not in his nature. What is in his nature is that when the suffering has occurred, to be with us, to help us get through it. We sometimes want to blame God, because it's easier then. But a lot of instances are of our own making. A lot of the horror that has befallen us is of human making. When we allow motivations like greed, selfishness, pride, wrath, the whole list of the 7 deadly sins, when we allow those motivations to work with us, within us, and to cause us to act in accordance with them rather than in accordance with God, that is when we breed suffering. Last week, this part of the state saw hurricane force winds. Now you think this far inland you'll never have to face that kind of wind. Well, surprise. God did not send that storm for some kind of retribution, as a punishment for something we have done. Where God is working now is in the relief efforts, in the hearts and minds of those who are pulling together to help others. There's an episode of The Simpsons, and if I ever do a Bible study on The Simpsons. This will be session 1, where Homer thinks that church is boring. So he decides that he's not going to go anymore. And through a series of events, at one point, one Sunday, he's sitting at home and he falls asleep with a lit cigar. And some ash from the cigar falls on a stack of newspapers he was reading, and his whole house erupts in an inferno. And the firemen come, and his neighbor, who he's always annoyed with, stupid Flanders, come and actually save him. And he's talking to his reverend, and he makes the comment, "Oh, truly this was the wrath of God." And in a rare instance of good insight, Reverend Lovejoy turns to Homer and says, "Homer, God did not cause your house to be lit on fire, but he was working in the hearts and minds of your neighbors when they came to your aid." That's what I view this storm like. God did not cause the winds to destroy so much land. The laws of physics, the laws of thermodynamics, all those things. Now we can say they were put in place by God, but those are the things, the systems in place that caused that storm to come up. Where God is taking an active place is in the relief efforts, in the churches that are doing drives to get supplies, in the people who are working to repair damage, to take away rubble. That is where God is present. God did not abandon us. He's still with us. God will never abandon us. He promised to be with us for all time, and to break a promise would require him to sin, and that is the one thing that is beyond God. God cannot sin because sin is not of God. That is not even remotely a part of his existence. Sin is brought into the world through our own selfish desires. Sin comes into the world through our own heart. God does not have any part of sin. And so God cannot break his word. When he says he will remain with us always, he means it. We look at the world and we want to try and place blame on things, place blame on people. And sometimes these things happen. We see earthquakes that destroy buildings. Well, earthquakes are caused by the plates that are shifting. And as they shift and move, they rub against each other, go underneath, go on top of each other, and that causes the earthquakes that cause the damage. And we want to blame God for the earthquakes. Well, God may have made the world, may have made the universe function in such a manner that that would happen. But do you know what would happen to the planet if the tectonic plates were not able to shift and move? The pressure within the planet would build up to the point where it would explode. And that you can look at as why our plates move. God did not cause that kind of destruction. That is not something God just does. He's not sitting there with some switchboard causing disasters left and right because he's bored. But where God does come in is when FEMA gets in, when UMCOR gets in, to try and provide relief efforts. God will never abandon us. Never, never, never. So even during this time where we can be nervous, we don't know what's coming next, take comfort in one thing. that when you pray, He's listening. When you ask for His presence to be with you, it's there. You might still catch the virus. That doesn't mean God doesn't love you or that you've been unfaithful. It means that He's going to be there with you while you face it. When we catch ailments beside the virus, it's not that God sent it to us. It's that God will be there with us through that duration. We take steps to minimize our risks. We take steps out of caring. Out of Wesley's first rule, do no harm. Because to do otherwise would be irresponsible. And that would be not of God. God finds ways to bring light even into the darkness. And if you don't believe that, I've had people now who have talked to me that they have seen a different side of the church now. Formerly, their only exposure was to the televangelists, and not the good ones. The ones who want your money. The ones who want to buy their third, fourth, fifth jumbo jet. The ones who preach that if you give me money, then your life will be better. A lot of people, that was their only exposure to Christianity. And now they're seeing local churches posting their services online. Pastors like me doing these kind of online devotionals as a time to connect, as a time to remind ourselves that God is still with us. And they see a different side of Christianity. And they want to know more. They want to experience that side. Even in this dark time, God finds a way to make His presence known. God has not abandoned us, and He will never abandon us. Well, that was a little more somber than originally intended, but just a reminder that we are still doing virtual worship for the time being. I have successfully burned the CDs or the DVDs. They are at the churches now, so you can go ahead and pick those up if you so desire. Or at the church, rather. If you have any concerns, please don't hesitate. If you aren't able to get one, let other members of the church know. Let me know. We'll find a way. Otherwise, I will see you all again here tomorrow, 10 a.m., and we will have another devotional. So, have a good day, everybody.